George Rao, who is a member of our hearing board, is in the audience. He would be recusing himself from this item because he did work on it. The hearing board held the, use the term infamous, but the Masonite hearings in the early 1990s. They were the hearing body that heard the concerns from the public and issued, believe they issued a permit after the appeal was heard and required changes to the line at that point. Basically, how the process works is an application would come to the district. That application is reviewed by district staff. They make recommendations on it. That's given to the APCO for review. The APCO then makes a determination if the permit meets all the outlined requirements in law. And at that point, there's a public notice put out, and then the public has the opportunity to appeal that decision. And I believe it's a 30-day window for a project of this size. We also have the option of taking public comment before the permit is issued, and we did do that, for example, on the Kiewit Pacific plant. We had a night meeting here with the neighborhood, and we had, we heard a lot of their concerns, a lot of very similar concerns that we heard today before we issued a permit. And the public then has the opportunity to pay a fee and appeal the project to the hearing board, and the hearing board has to make a series of 7 findings, very similar to what a planning commission would do.
All right, and but the fact that this is not a supervisorial function, but rather is air quality board. The question I would then raise, given the number of concerns that have been expressed here about air quality, precisely who makes up this board and how is it appointed, and what authority does it have vis-a-vis the Board of Supervisors?
Well, you appoint the members. The board has
as the air quality board.
As the air quality board. There are 10 members, 5 of which are alternates, and there is a makeup outlined in code that you need a doctor, a lawyer. I think there's one other requirement, and then you have 2 general members of the public. And then the same thing for the alternates. However, that code section does say that if you have less than 150,000 population in the county, you can just appoint public members. For example, Webb Brown was on the hearing board as a medical representative for 30-some years, I think, Carrie, yeah. And we've had George Rouse been on the board for at least a decade, probably more now, 15, 17 years. It's a fairly quiet board. It's not very active, but when it's needed, it's needed. That's very important that we have these folks. So I encourage you to seek people to be on the board. I encourage members of the public, if they're interested, to contact either the district or the clerk of the board's office. We did have somebody who came on the board earlier this year who just resigned recently because of health reasons. Okay, and then the question comes up here that you alluded to a process that you would pick up on this, that is the air quality district, excuse me, would pick up on this this particular EIR after a draft is submitted and approved by the Board of Supervisors. It seems to me that's backwards. It seems to me that you would be weighing in at this particular juncture, and it would be part of what was being brought forward. Can you explain to me and to the public what the sequencing is here and what process? How does this parallel the process that's being undertaken with our consultant? Okay, Frank can kind of chime in on it too as our CEQA expert, but basically for all the agencies that have a responsibility under the project, Regional Water Board, ourselves, we received the CEQA document, the draft. In this case, I believe I was actually given an administrative draft, an internal draft, and we provide comments on those drafts, request changes, and then the agency that's preparing the draft, which in this case, I believe it is the county of Mendocino. Sometimes it's the Planning Commission, sometimes it's the Board of Supervisors. When they're preparing the draft, they can choose to accept or reject the comments from other agencies. This happened to us in Willits a couple of years ago. The city of Willits decided to reject a district mitigation measure that we had requested on a project. The district then has the option of saying, well, we're not going to accept your CEQA document because it didn't address our issues. Or we could say, well, it addresses our issues adequately, but we need a minor amendment, or it is fine and we will accept it. So there is a CEQA process outlined in district regulation. I think it's Appendix A of Regulation 1, if memory serves. We revised it about 7 years ago. That parallels the county process, where it basically says, you know, the APCO can determine if we're going to accept a CEQA document from another agency. If we do accept it, then it's an automatic process. If we don't accept it, then we can hire a consultant at the applicant's expense to go through and do that. So, for example, one of the issues we've talked about, and the district has submitted comments on the EIR, the draft EIR, about a week and a half ago. One of the issues we had was the issue of horsepower. How big will the generator be? Right now, there's a 1,000 horsepower generator on the site. It's about 5 years old, if memory serves. There's been talk about replacing that engine, maybe with a larger engine up to 1,500 horsepower. One of my comments to Leonard was, we need to know exactly what size engine we're going to have, because that impacts the air emissions. If the EIR is certified without that issue being resolved, then I would go back and request an addendum that would accurately reflect the permit that would be in front of me. For example, if I received a permit that says, no, we're going to have 2,500 horsepower generator, then I would have to request a CEQA addendum. The district hasn't requested a CEQA addendum on a project since I've been there. I don't know what Frank's memory is, and maybe he has anything additional to add if I didn't accurately describe the process.
I believe Mr. Brown has covered the essence of the process. And of course, there can be other agencies, such as other state agencies, depending on what the project is, Fish and Game, regional water quality, which can also get involved. Our district, of course, is kind of a hybrid.
Right. Well, the concern is primarily focusing on air quality, because a number of concerns have been raised here coming from the public. So, if the EIR were certified by the Board of Supervisors, and you still had some objections, what authority do you have, and what kind of sanctions do you have to see that the process does not proceed or is allowed to go forward?
Well, basically, it's the permitting process. The permitting process is discretionary to some degree, and this is, as I'm looking over at Frank, because this is something that's always been batted around. Is the air quality permit process truly discretionary, or is it purely administrative? There are aspects of it that are discretionary, because permit conditions can vary from project to project based on local issues. For example, on the Kiewit project, we had a throughput limitation that said they could only process so much material per day. It was actually based on a 20-hour cycle for different reasons. And we have a similar condition on granite. It's a different condition, but it's a similar condition on granite in Ukiah. So there's some discretion in choosing those permit conditions. And so that's where this issue of, is an air quality permit discretionary or not, comes up. We do not have the authority to deny a permit if it meets all of the standards outlined in state and federal law and district regulation. We can't just deny a permit on grounds of neighborhood opposition.
No, but I am seeing the problem here with the possibility of discretionary versus non-discretionary kicking in at a point at which there's a critical juncture, and I'm not. I think that needs to be pinned down as this project proceeds, at least for this supervisor, because I would not want to be in a position here of seeing that that's what the project hinges on, whether it goes forward or not. And we argue the question of discretionary after so many of the other issues are resolved or dealt with.
Right.
The other question I have, and then I'll be done for the moment. You mentioned